And we have this special guest in our studio, Vanessa Black. She's a filmmaker from the United States. Good night.
Good evening.
Pleased to see you here.
Thank you for having me.
What has inspired you to film the documentary of Euromaidan?
So the last few months, the situation in Ukraine has been in the headlines worldwide, and I've been watching from New York, where I live. And after the events on the 18th, 19th, and 20th of February, where they had the last big shootings, I felt very compelled to come to Ukraine and film the documentary about the people who have fought and brought down their government. I thought it was a very compelling story, and one that should be told, and one that should be told in English, because I know it's being told here, but we don't necessarily understand it there. And I wanted to try to relate what has happened here to a younger audience in the United States.
What is the reason of Euromaidan for American watchers, for American citizens?
In the United States, often we're so far removed from Europe, and we're so far removed from the politics of the rest of the world. We live in this kind of incubated
You're detached
little
from
world.
the rest of the world with the ocean.
Yeah, we're just detached, and we have a very peaceful life full of a lot of freedoms that we take for granted. And I know that whether it's political or personal, there are some really incredible stories that I knew were here and I knew should be told. And I don't think it's about politics. I think it's about just being a human, and I think it's about explaining what it's like to be a person on this planet in 2014 and to just care about our fellow man and have stories to tell.
What do you think about the representativeness of Euromaidan, or the defenders of Euromaidan? Did you make friends with some of them?
Yes, I have. I spend a lot of time in Maidan. I've met quite a few of the defenders. I've met doctors, I've met filmmakers, I've met photographers, I've met just young kids who are now part of the movement. I've met men who used to be builders, used to be farmers, but now they're here fighting for Euromaidan. So yeah, so it's been interesting, and I have gotten to build relationships with a few people.
Oh, okay. Could you please tell us just at least a couple of stories that inspired you in Euromaidan? So
the first conversation I had with a defender was with a man named Oleg, and we interviewed him in his camp with his friends. They're all sitting around and hanging out. I did filming Oleg, and pretty quickly he started crying, and it was very moving for me to see a grown man become so washed over with emotions, and it was pretty powerful to hear through his eyes and his heart what has been happening here, and be speaking with a man who's lost so much and who's willing to lose so much for Ukraine. So after that conversation, I was pretty distraught for the week. I couldn't really sleep. I had trouble eating.
So you have seen how they stand for human rights here,
yeah,
for the human values.
And they stand for the people who have passed away. Oleg was saying that he will do anything that he can to preserve Ukraine and fight for Ukraine, because he doesn't want his brothers to have fallen in vain. He doesn't want them to feel like they fought for nothing.
Tell us, please, what do you think about Euromaidan in comparison with other protests?
I've never walked through a place that looks like Maidan. It's pretty incredible seeing the barricades, and though I don't have experience with other protests, I can't imagine a protest going so far as this one did. The stakes were so high, and people achieved so much. The government fell. The president fell. It's pretty incredible.
What does Euromaidan look like?
From my point of view, I don't have a reference for the other two situations, but walking around is an unbelievable experience. You slightly feel like you're in a Spielberg film. You feel like this sounds horrible, but my experience has always been on films. So it almost felt like being on a film set. But then you realize, no, this is real life. People really built these. Those are real burnt cars that are put in these barricades, and the barricades are huge. They're expansive. There are so many of them. My first day, I walked down to the Krishnatic with my camera, And I saw the first barricade, and I was blown away by that. And then I kept seeing how big they actually got, and they're thick and they're dense and they're full of everything from tires to cars to gates to lampposts to benches, just anything you can imagine that can move, any object that isn't bolted to the ground, and even objects that probably at one time were bolted to the ground are now in these mounds throughout the city. And it's unbelievable to look at them. And actually, when we've been filming, a lot of our filming we've done in slow motion. So the idea is it takes time to realize what is in these barricades, and it takes time to process. So you can see the history of how these barricades have evolved. You can see the different layers of burnt material, and you can kind of see like a timeline, like looking at rings on a tree, if that makes sense. You can kind of see how they've grown. So as we film in slow motion so that the viewer back home in the United States can understand that feeling where it just feels like time slows down looking at them, because you slowly see what makes these barricades, what came together to make them.
So it was your first experience to be at the real war.
Definitely, yeah. A lot of the work that I do is commercial work and music work, fashion work, and my passion is telling stories like this, telling documentaries. And I wanted to take my pop culture background and my experience photographing people in the fashion world and bring that together to tell a story about real life that was visually compelling in the same way those mediums are. So that was the idea behind this project.
Tell us, Vanessa, please, do you plan to move to Donetsk, to eastern Ukraine, or perhaps to Crimea, to include some stages into your film, into your documentary from that places,
I think
just reflecting the political processes in Crimea?
Well, I think
what is in Donetsk?
I think as you can relate to, we're all kind of living day by day, since we're all waiting to see what happens tomorrow. So after tomorrow, we'll have a better idea of what we will do. So today, all I can say is today. So today we're in Kiev, and we're telling the stories of people in Kiev. And who knows what the future holds? And this project, it changes every day. So we'll just see what happens, but it's a possibility.
Where are you playing? Where are you going to represent your documentary?
So we have a YouTube channel that we're showing our projects on. We do daily digital videos where we mix interesting music and our projects and stylized cinematography with interviews, and we distribute that daily for our audience. And then at the end, we'll plan on doing a film that we'll submit to festivals. Yeah, you can see it on YouTube, and then we update our Twitter and Instagram if people want to see them there. So we do little previews that you can see online.
You're mailing with your friends in the United States. How do you think, do they realize that the Crimean crisis may cause the restarting of the Cold War right here? The frontier is right here. Do they realize that?
I think so. Well, this is the biggest head-to-head conflict between Russia and the United States since the Cold War. And I hope that people know this because it's an incredible fact. And I hope that the work that I'm doing makes that reality more relatable for younger people.
The American politicians, do you feel their responsibility for what is going on here in Eastern Europe, in the Crimea frontier? How do you think?
I don't know if I'm qualified to answer that question. I hope that whatever political conversations take place, whatever diplomacy goes forward, I hope that it is that there's a peaceful situation, but I think that this is the beginning of a very long conflict, whether it's an actual combat or just a diplomatic conflict, I'm not sure. But I think that there is a responsibility for the United States to bring peace to the situation, and I know the world looks at the United States as the peacekeeper. I don't know if that's a responsibility we should always assume, but it is a responsibility that we have, and I know that the world's looking at us to stand up and do something for Ukraine. And I think that that it's not just about Ukraine, it's about the whole world. It's about possible world war. It's much bigger than
What
just
kind
that.
of responsibility you should underline to export, to share the democratic values, to share democracy over the world, and the institutional support?
Well, I think any country, the people should be picking what kind of politics they want to have in place, whether it's so I think I don't think that's something that an external force should be placing on a country. I think that should come from within. I don't think the United States should come in here and say, oh, you need to be this capitalist democratic country. I think that that's something that we'll see in the elections that come forward, and we'll see what the people of Ukraine would like as their government.
Have you seen any documentaries made by Ukrainian filmmakers, Russian filmmakers on the Euromaidan?
There is a group called Babylon 13 that are doing some
Babylon 13, yeah.
Do you know them?
Of course.
They do some very powerful videos that are short pieces that give you kind of bite-sized take on what has happened here, and that was hugely influential in my research and background in the conflict and the revolution. So I highly suggest checking them out.
Would you like to be back here after Euromaidan, after Crimean crisis, and to continue your filmmaking here on any other aspect of everyday life of Ukrainians? Is it an amazing project for you?
Well, I love Ukraine. I love Kiev. I love my friends here. I think it's a beautiful city. It's an incredible city. Before the revolution, I remember thinking of it being a bit of a storybook with the beautiful pastel buildings, and so yeah, of course I'd love to come back, but I want to make sure that whatever happens here is peaceful, and I can tell a story and help people tell their stories. So yeah, I'd like to come back, but my work now is about what's happening here in Ukraine, and I'll be here until further notice, so I'm not planning on going back to the States anytime soon.